Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas.
7 fighter jets. Gone. Not in a dogfight, not over enemy territory. Sitting inside a hardened shelter, inside a base that was supposed to be untouchable, on American soil. And that's not even the story. The story is what happened 48 hours later, when one of America's closest allies in the Middle East handed Washington a note, a diplomatic note. And inside that note were 2 words that no American general has heard from a partner nation since 1983. Get out. You think the missile strike on Dhafra was the most dangerous moment of this war? It wasn't. The most dangerous moment happened in a closed room in Abu Dhabi, when the United Arab Emirates looked at the wreckage of 7 F-35s and made a calculation. A cold, purely economic calculation. And that calculation concluded that America, for the first time, had become more dangerous to keep than to lose. Let that sink in for a second. The country that hosts the most advanced American air base in the entire Gulf region has given the most powerful military in human history 48 hours to pack up and leave. This is day 15 of the war, and the United States is winning every battle. But right now, it is losing the entire region. Here is exactly what happened, and why the next 72 hours could redraw every military map in the Middle East. March 13th, 3:22 in the morning local time. 6 Khorramshahr-4 ballistic missiles were launched from western Iran. Not at Tehran's enemies on the battlefield, not at a military convoy, at a specific set of coordinates inside the United Arab Emirates, a country that officially has nothing to do with this war. The target was Dhafra Air Base, the most fortified American installation in the entire Gulf, and the missiles hit exactly where they were aimed. Now, here's what makes this different from every other missile attack we've seen in this conflict. Iran didn't just fire in the general direction of the base and hope for the best. These missiles, each carrying a warhead between 500 and 1,800 kilograms, impacted with a circular error probable of 2 to 5 meters. That's not a rocket attack. That is a surgical procedure. Iran used signal intelligence and satellite imagery to identify the exact shelters where the F-35As were stored, the shelters that were specifically designed and built to protect America's most expensive, most classified aircraft from precisely this kind of attack. 7 F-35A Lightning IIs, each one worth between $80 million and $100 million, vaporized in approximately 4 seconds. $560 million, gone in a single night. And what did it cost Iran to do it? 6 missiles. $6 million. That is a 100-to-1 kill ratio in Iran's favor, and they didn't lose a single pilot. 12 United States Air Force personnel were killed. 19 more were wounded, 8 of them critically. This is the moment the Gulf changed, because here is what the Emirati leadership saw in the aftermath of that strike, and what they understood instantly, even as American commanders were still assessing the damage. If Iran can penetrate the most hardened American shelter in the Middle East with that level of precision, then there is no target in the UAE that is safe. Not the Dubai Financial Center, not the energy infrastructure in Abu Dhabi, not the desalination plants that provide water to 9 million people, not Burj Khalifa, not a single building, a single road, a single runway. Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed didn't send that ultimatum to Washington because he's angry. He's not angry. He's running a balance sheet. And on that balance sheet, having American forces on UAE soil has now become, mathematically, a liability. Every hour that U.S. forces remain in the Emirates is an hour that Iran has a legitimate military justification to turn Abu Dhabi into a battlefield. So the UAE did what any rational economic actor does when the risk-reward ratio flips. It cut its losses. The official note delivered through the American ambassador to CENTCOM said, and I'm paraphrasing the diplomatic language, that the UAE can no longer guarantee the security of American personnel on its territory. It requested a phased withdrawal. That is the language of eviction, in 48 hours. This is the first time since the Beirut barracks bombing in 1983 that a U.S. ally has formally asked America to remove its forces while those forces were actively in a combat theater. Think about what that means for one moment. In 1983, 241 American servicemen were killed in a single bombing in Lebanon. And even then, the Lebanese government didn't send a note demanding withdrawal. They waited. They negotiated. The UAE is not waiting. And this is not Lebanon. This is the financial capital of the Arab world. Now, before we get into the domino that this sets off, and there is a domino, a very large one, let me give you the full picture of where this war actually stands on day 15. Because the American narrative and the strategic reality are 2 very different things right now. Since February 28th, Iran has launched more than 650 ballistic missiles and approximately 2,600 kamikaze drones. And the United States and Israel have struck more than 6,000 targets inside Iran. military industrial facilities, ballistic missile production lines, command infrastructure. The financial cost to the U.S. side alone has exceeded $12 billion. The total confirmed American military casualties across the theater stand at 19. More than 1,400 Iranian civilians have lost their lives. On paper, this looks like an American victory. Air defenses dismantled, naval assets erased from the map. Iran's missile volume has collapsed by 90% from peak launch rates. Drone capacity is down 95%. The IRGC's conventional military, the Air Force, the Navy, the surface-to-surface missile batteries, has been systematically taken apart. And yet, Iran is not losing the war. Iran is winning the war it actually planned to fight. Because here's what Tehran understood years before the first bomb fell. Iran cannot defeat the United States in a conventional engagement. That was never the strategy. The strategy was always this: make the cost of keeping America in the Gulf so high, economically, politically, diplomatically, that America's own allies force the withdrawal that Iran could never achieve militarily. And on day 15, that strategy is working. The Strait of Hormuz has been effectively closed for 15 consecutive days. Oil is trading above $115 per barrel. Not since the 1973 oil embargo has the strait been closed for this long. Every tanker that normally transits those 21 miles, carrying roughly 20% of the world's total oil supply, has been diverted. The insurance rates for vessels attempting to pass have become essentially prohibitive. Karg Island, the terminal through which Iran handles 90% of its oil exports, has had its military infrastructure completely destroyed by American strikes. But here's the detail that keeps analysts awake at night. Washington has deliberately left the oil infrastructure itself untouched. The storage tanks, the loading terminals, the pipelines, they are still standing. And that is not an oversight. That is a message. America is telling Iran, we can turn your entire economic engine to ash the moment we choose to. We are choosing not to, for now. The question is why? The answer connects directly to what is happening in the Gulf states right now. It is the beginning of a sequence. Saudi Arabia has been watching. On March 11th, 3 Sejil missiles struck near Prince Sultan Air Base. Riyadh said nothing publicly. The palace went quiet. But in the corridors of the Saudi Defense Ministry, the same calculation is being run on the same spreadsheets. Is the American presence worth the risk? Are the security guarantees that Washington has provided for 40 years still credible when Iranian ballistic missiles are landing inside hardened American shelters? Qatar is making the same calculation. The Qatari foreign minister has already sent diplomatic signals, carefully worded, deniable but unmistakable, that Al Udeid Air Base, home to 10,000 American troops and the forward headquarters of CENTCOM itself, could face pressure to close. Al Udeid is not just a base. Al Udeid is the nerve center of the entire American military operation in the theater. If Al Udeid closes, CENTCOM loses its brain. This is Iran's masterpiece, and it was planned this way. Tehran did not need to destroy every American asset in the Gulf. It only needed to demonstrate, convincingly, visibly, with footage that every Gulf royal family watched on repeat, that it could reach those assets, that it had the intelligence to find them, that it had the precision to hit them, and that it had the political will to do so regardless of consequence. One strike on Al-Dhafra, 7 aircraft, 12 fatalities. And suddenly, the entire strategic architecture that America has built in the Gulf over 4 decades begins to crack. Not from Iranian military pressure, but from inside, from the economic terror that has seized every boardroom and every palace between Kuwait City and Muscat. Now let's talk about what happens if the domino falls completely. If the UAE follows through, and every indicator suggests it will, and if Saudi Arabia and Qatar follow the UAE's lead, the United States loses its entire forward operating network in the Persian Gulf. Every logistics hub, every fuel depot, every pre-positioned weapons cache, every intelligence sharing facility, the U.S. military would be forced to pull back hundreds of miles, to Jordan, to Iraq, to Djibouti. That is not a tactical retreat. That is a strategic collapse of American power projection in the most energy-critical region on Earth. And here's the terrible irony. America would have won every battle, destroyed more Iranian military capacity in 15 days than most wars destroy in years, killed more enemy commanders in a single campaign than any operation since the Second World War. And yet, Iran would claim a strategic victory, because the goal was never to defeat America on the battlefield. The goal was to make America's allies tell America to go home. Inside Tehran, the regime is in a state that I can only describe as controlled catastrophe. The new supreme leader, the son of the man who was erased from the map 2 weeks ago, is reported by American and Israeli intelligence to be in critical condition, severely wounded, possibly in a coma. The IRGC generals who installed him are now making decisions without a functioning figurehead. The Iranian security apparatus, soldiers and officers who have not received their salaries in weeks, is beginning to fracture from within. Reports are emerging of coordinated defections, of ordinary Iranian citizens transmitting the GPS coordinates of drone storage facilities and missile launchers directly to Israeli and American intelligence networks. The regime is bleeding from the inside, but a bleeding regime with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous kind of regime that exists, because the one card Tehran still holds, the last card, the asymmetric card that costs almost nothing and can trigger a global economic catastrophe, is the Strait of Hormuz. The Trump administration knows this. CENTCOM is preparing a forced opening operation. Submarine deployments, mine-clearing assets, tanker convoy protocols that haven't been activated since the Iran-Iraq tanker war of the 1980s. If the operation succeeds, oil flows resume. If it fails, or if it takes longer than the markets can absorb, the price of oil does not stop at $115 per barrel. It goes to $150 to $170. And at those levels, you don't have an oil crisis. You have a global recession. Western supply chains fracture. Inflation returns to levels not seen since the 1970s. President Trump has privately described the current oil price spike as a small, winding road, a temporary deviation on the way to a post-war price of $50 per barrel. That is the vision. A broken Iranian regime, Hormuz open, Gulf states realigned under American protection, Iranian oil eventually flowing freely under a new, friendly government. But between that vision and today, there's a 48-hour clock ticking in Abu Dhabi. And when that clock hits zero, the map changes. The question that every intelligence agency on Earth is asking tonight is not whether America can win this war militarily. The answer to that question was settled in the first 72 hours of Operation Epic Fury. The real question, the question that will define the next decade of American power in the Middle East, is this: can the United States win a war and still lose the region? The next 48 hours will give us the answer, and whatever that answer is, the world that exists on the other side of it will not look like the world we woke up to 15 days ago. The bases are emptying, the allies are calculating, the strait is closed. And somewhere in Tehran, in a room that no satellite can see, the last move on this board is being decided. Stay close. Because the next phase of this collapse does not start in Iran. It starts in the Gulf. And it starts now.